Welcome!
Hey guys, welcome to the Omniverse of Nick, and the final part to What If Whiplash Turned Good. Before we get started, be sure to check out the Omniverse's homepage, where our channel mascot Omni will direct you to the Discord, both Google Docs, and everything else the Omniverse has to offer, along with smashing the like button, subscribing to the Omniverse of Nick, sharing the Omniverse around, and turning on all Omniverse notifications, and commenting future requests and expectations in the comments section. With all that said, let's begin. We open up where we ended off last time. Avengers Age of Ultron is coming up. And it goes very much the same, except we're going to have dramatic changes to end this. Ultron shows up, stages his whole plan, gets his big body and everything, and gets Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch involved. And then we get to the scene where the army is brought in. And Whiplash becomes extremely present for the entire movie, but this is where he shines for the first time, showing he is one of the main people to kill Ultron. And he's on the front lines to end the war, both literally and figuratively. And Ultron is defeated. But Sokovia isn't destroyed in this timeline. Quicksilver survives, and the Avengers are all together still. Hulk is not going to go into space, and by the end of this video, you'll see how I explain everything and how this doesn't really affect too much in the long run. You'll see. The Sokovia Accords are not going to be created. Civil War is not going to happen, which means Crossbones, whenever he comes into the picture, Scarlet Witch is not going to be the one to, accidentally throw him into the hospital because of everything being so dramatically different. Whiplash is the one to detain him and stop him completely. When Bucky becomes present, he is still in hiding, but whether or not he would kill T'Challa's father, Cap would resolve everything along with all of the Avengers together. Cap and Tony would have eventually discussed the whole Tony's parents thing, but Anton Whiplash would tell him that revenge about my family consumed me, Tony. Don't let it consume you, because it almost killed me. Don't let it get you. And Rhodey agrees that for the first time, he agrees with Anton and says that if he does this, he'll destroy everything that he has built with Whiplash Anton. And that's not what his family or anybody would want. And Cap and Tony have a hard, full discussion, but eventually Tony has to admit that Rhodey and everybody else in Anton is right. But he says that in order to not want to kill Bucky, he has to go away for quite a long time. He'll try to keep in touch, but in order to not kill Cap's best friend, as much as he wants to, he is going to stop himself because of Anton and Rhodey. He doesn't want it to consume him. So for now, he can't be around them. So he goes away. But when Infinity War shows up, and everybody, I'm talking a full decked roster, goes to Wakanda, Tony is present there. And I am talking full decked. Cap is there with his shield. Hulk is there as Hulk, not as Bruce Banner or anything. Whiplash is there with the Whiplash suit Mark IV, yellow and blue, kind of like Iron Man, and with blue and black whips. Spider-Man is there because he would have been a great way for Tony to get over, him and Tony would have talked throughout the time that Civil War should have happened and Infinity War was starting to happen. And so he has a great motivation for not wanting to kill Bucky for Tony, and of course they would have met, regardless of if they fought the other team or not. Bucky is there with his metal arm, so he doesn't need a replacement. Doctor Strange is there with the Time Stone, so whenever Thanos' top men and the Chitauri are there, they are absolutely no match at all. Thanos shows up, but with only 2 stones, if that, to his name, he is no match for them at all. barely. And as for the Guardians and Thor, that is going to go almost exactly the same, except with minor changes that I will touch upon in the end of this video. You'll see why me not explaining it or Hulk not going is not going to be a huge big deal. You'll see. And Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Iron Man, Whiplash, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and Vision all together remove the Infinity Gauntlet, and then Thor shows up with Stormbreaker and delivers the finishing killing blow to Thanos. And the Avengers Endgame's not going to happen, and the multiverse is never going to be brought into the fold. All because Anton von Whiplash survived, which caused Quicksilver, Iron Man, Steve Rogers, Black Widow, and Vision to survive. All this revolves around Anton von Whiplash surviving. And at the end, we see Doctor Strange with the Time Stone, patrolling and visioning the multiverse, and seeing that not only is there more than one universe he overlooked that could help them win, but there's a lot more to the multiverse, especially a universe or multiverse that doesn't even bring one into existence that he never even knew about, and that no one probably will ever, should ever figure out. And maybe sometimes that's for the better. So, this ends the story of what if Whiplash, aka Ivan Vanko, survived. Or turned good. There wasn't really much to do with him turning evil and, surviving and still being evil. So turning him good was honestly the best outcome, so to speak. So it almost should have been called What If Whiplash Turned Good. So you guys might be asking, how in the world did it get from such a slow start to an overwhelming ending with the multiverse never being created and it being kind of overkill for the end and for Thanos? Well, it all has to do with Whiplash being connected to Iron Man in a sort of way. Think about it. The only reason that he made the suit of armor and made the tech of his whips and everything is because of tech from Tony. So this just goes to show with him, Iron Man, and War Machine, that just perked up our group permanently. And it didn't take until Ultron to really show how freaking OP Whiplash really is. And because of Sokovia never being, lifted up and massively destroyed, that means the Sokovia Accords would never be created. And because of Whiplash's help, Quicksilver would survive. And if Quicksilver survives and the Sokovia Accords are never created, this means not only is literally every single person's character better, that means that Civil War doesn't happen. And if Civil War doesn't happen, the only big problem in that area is getting Crossbones contained, which you have Scarlet Witch and Whiplash. So that means there's no hospital explosion. And if there's no hospital explosion, that means that the group is even more good in that regard. And yeah, there would be the whole Hulk thing, turning possibly and going along with the whole fighting the Hulkbuster and everything like that. But with so small of things to really put on the Avengers, it was the Sokovia Accords and massive destruction that really brought upon the whole thing. We can't just pin on to Civil War because of Hulk and the Hulkbuster. That is not why Civil War happened. The entire reason Civil War happened is because of the Sokovia Accords and because of the whole deal with Sokovia and just the hospital explosion. And since all that didn't happen, as I stated, the Avengers will have no reason to split or turn over their powers or even fight each other and go on this tirade. And if they don't go on this tirade, the only problem is Bucky. And if Bucky is contained, which you have much more characters to contain him, then you got the problem of Tony having to be brought onto the realization that Bucky killed his parents. But since you have Ivan, who wanted revenge on Tony for his family, he would be there to contain and morally talk to Tony. And since he's there, you also have Rhodes and literally everybody involved, and that would make Tony a much more better person. Yeah, he'd still be mad at Bucky for a long, long time, but he would have no intent to kill him, even though maybe part of him would still want to. And if all of this doesn't happen, Hulk doesn't get on the Quinjet, which means he doesn't go to Planet Hulk. And if he doesn't go to Planet Hulk, you might be like, well, if he doesn't go to Planet Hulk, what happens to Thor and everything? Because the entire reason that Thor, got to where he was and everything, would he even get off of Planet Sakaar? As a matter of fact, yes. And it would actually be sort of easier, in my opinion. Now let's look at this, since I didn't actually dive into this too much. Let's say he is stuck on Planet Sakaar, like the normal story. Everything goes the same, right? Since I didn't touch upon Thor's character, right? Let's touch upon it here. When we get to Thor Ragnarok, the entire thing plays out the same until Planet Sakaar. But when Thor has to fight the hero, there's really no one there. There's literally nobody. And if he was forced to fight Loki, then it would be I really highly doubt that he would need or be put in the position to fight against Loki. So all that there would have to be put into place is Thor finding the ship, like he did, and with no Hulk to ram the signal, if anything, he would probably escape sooner, in my opinion. Whether Valkyrie would go too is questionable, but I feel that with time, Loki would warm up to the idea and try to get Valkyrie on his side, and eventually, maybe Thor stays. It's debatable, but I feel that Loki and Valkyrie would join Thor eventually, and if Thor didn't have a plan going forward, let's say this. If he goes by himself to the entire deal with Hela, and he goes and fights and escapes sooner, then honestly it pretty much goes the same, except for the fact that Hulk's not there. Now, the only thing that Hulk did in the grand scheme of things was fight against the big animal thing that Hela created. So, when you really look at it, nothing really changes. So, if Loki and Valkyrie still showed up, then the entire thing would play out the same, except Hulk's appearance is not there. It only really infects Planet Sakaar, And maybe Thor wouldn't be able to access the ship, because the only way that they accessed the ship was Banner. But then again, it took them forever to even repair the ship, and I believe they just ended up taking another ship anyway. So, let's look at it this way. Say Thor takes the ship, goes there, and goes on this tirade. It would end up the same especially if Loki and Valkyrie would appear later, which I guarantee would happen, or maybe all three of them would go together Either way, besides Hulk not being there, everything goes the same. He fights against Hela, loses terribly, and Loki and Valkyrie, they're still there. They deal with the dog instead, and then have to fight the army. And then Thor gets his powers and everything and fights, and then Surtur is awakened and destroys Asgard, and then the entire thing there plays the same, except they don't have Hulk to call upon, which means Loki dies just a little bit sooner. And then Thor gets sent. You might ask, what about Hulk not being there? Does this mean that why would Thor have Stormbreaker if Hulk's not there? Wouldn't he just get sent to Earth instead of Hulk? Well, I believe that he would stay, and it would be put into a position where Thor is literally just... He ends up with the Guardians anyway, and Stormbreaker ends up getting created, and then all of them show up right then, but Thor, he just shows up for the true element of surprise with Stormbreaker, you know? But, let's look at it from this perspective. Let's say that Thor gets the ship, and he doesn't go to face off against Hela, like in the original, and the only difference being Hulk. So let's say this version of events didn't happen. Let's say he went, and he actually went to the giant and did go for another weapon. He doesn't have the Guardians to call upon. So, this means that he would kind of likely die. But, since he didn't have his powers awakened, this could give him the advantage to call upon those powers at that will, which would most likely save his life, and then Stormbreaker would still get created, and then he meets the Guardians, and maybe the Guardians run into him, or he just meets the Guardians out in space, and then he recovers in said ship. Or maybe he doesn't need to recover at all because of the Axe's powers, his powers, or maybe he's just too injured, just waits for the element of surprise, and Loki and Valkyrie just stay on planet Sakaar, and maybe Thanos just finds them eventually and just destroys the entire planet for some reason, or they just never leave. And then Loki remains alive, and Valkyrie just remains on planet Sakaar, and yeah, that pretty much just goes how that goes. And that's kind of like an situation. But with Thor having Stormbreaker, I forgot to add one thing. Before he would meet the Guardians, this poses a thing that I did a long time ago. Let's add on to a little thing before I just made this version of events. Thor gets Stormbreaker, right? He goes on the ship from planet Sakaar, and Loki and Valkyrie don't go. Like I said before, he goes, gets Stormbreaker, awakens the powers, unlocks Stormbreaker, looks different, it's not Groot, and maybe he meets the Guardians beforehand, goes to his home, Asgard, deals with Hela, but has Stormbreaker and has way more functionability and edge over Hela. Surtur is awakened, and it just goes the same, except Thor's more alive, still meets Thanos in space, but this poses the question, would he even be able to, since you touched upon it in your whole idea with your what if Thor got Stormbreaker against Hela, you made Thor kill Thanos in space. So does this version of events really make sense? Well, no. But if he didn't go and everything, Hela would basically remain on Asgard and conquer it. and Thanos would eventually come across it and possibly kill her anyway. But so we're gonna go with that not being the most logical of situations. And then we got another plausible situation. Let's just say that, for the record, the most logical situation that could happen with Thor is that without Hulk, the only thing that gets affected is Planet Sakaar. Okay? So, without Planet Sakaar having Hulk, this means that they would either have to not use the Quinjet, which is not there. So, that's the thing. That's the thing I forgot to add. Without the Quinjet, they would have to get another ship. Would Thor find another ship? Most likely. Because I feel that, or if I remember, Valkyrie had a ship. Or they would just find a ship. So, you're probably like, Nick, didn't you pay attention to this moment of the MCU at all before you made this what if? Especially this part about Thor. I feel like you just rushed through the essentials and just wanted to get to the fact that Whiplash literally overpowers our team and just wanted to get the what if done. That's true to a point. But overall, I think that the part with Thor is just needlessly pointless to think about, because I feel that it would just be the same thing overall. Thor, Valkyrie, and Loki would just find another ship or just use Valkyries to get off the planet. Thor and Loki would convince Valkyrie, they would go, except Hulk wouldn't be there. Banner, whatever the frick. Because he would obviously be on Earth. Because, events. And then they would deal with Hela. Surtur would be awakened. They'd meet Thanos. Loki dies. Thor remains, meets Guardians, gets Stormbreaker, recovers. All of them go to Earth. Thor waits for the element, gets Thanos whenever the gauntlet's taken off. Everybody wins. So honestly, I feel that that's the most logical way of going about things, because the only thing that Hulk or Banner affected on Planet Sakaar was being the champion and having just the Quinjet, because it was basically destroyed anyway. So I don't even think that that was a factor that we really needed to put into the story at all. So honestly, it's debatable which event of which beliefs of events that I just said that you guys want to believe or put in for how Thor's story up in space goes. Because the Quinjet's not there, so honestly, I feel like I kind of rambled with that part. But I did say another ship, because I didn't take into account the fact that the Quinjet wouldn't be in space, and the fact that Valkyrie's ship is also a thing. So, yeah. It's honestly just up to how you guys would really think about doing that, because honestly, it doesn't really matter when you really think about it. And Hulk being on Earth means that it really affects more on Earth, and it doesn't really affect much in space. Because, like I said, Planet Sakaar was the only thing that Hulk really affected. It was just fighting Thor on Planet Sakaar and being the champion, and that's it. And having a small moment on the Quinjet. So, yeah. And also, Hulk and Banner have a much better relationship. And this just goes to overall show. Like I said, it's just the whole deal with Thor, Loki, and Valkyrie is really nothing to worry about. And they don't fight Thanos in space. Maybe the Guardians still encounter Thanos. Gamora still dies for the stone. So that happens. But they don't have the planet on Xandar. They don't have the fight on Thanos' home. So that doesn't happen. Instead, that plan of motion that was Quill's that happens on Earth instead, which is why I pretty much made it kind of like that, if you guys were paying attention, which I feel like many people could probably guess. So let's just put this into short terms. Thor, Loki, Valkyrie, everything happens the same. Only thing different, Hulk's not there, Banner's not there, Loki still dies, Thor gets Stormbreaker, and Guardians and Thor go to Earth. Except, no snap happens, no multiverse, much less deaths, and it could have very well been a timeline that Doctor Strange was looking at, and if it went just a little bit differently, with Whiplash surviving, it could have been that one timeline where they all won. And with no multiverse, that cuts our story very, 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 very short. So, it's honestly up to you guys where you would have the story go from here, how you would have Thor's adventure happen, and how you honestly think about this tale of Whiplash or Ivan surviving. I feel like maybe many of you thought it was going to be different with him still being evil or turning good and not really affecting that much or doing somehow different from how I had it. But it just goes to show Whiplash was severely underrated. I don't think many people actually remember him. Heck, I forgot about him for a time, but I've always had a fascination for Whiplash because I honestly think that he is one of the most underrated Iron Man villains of all time. And many people don't even think about Obadiah, which he's got a story or two in the future as well. But he is definitely way less important than Whiplash, who affected a lot here, but not too much overall. It's sort of like Bucky becoming Captain America. It affects only really the Iron Man movies and then the Avengers. So, like I said, for those who really want to look at the Thor perspective, it's up to you guys. Those who really want to look at what would happen with no multiverse, it's up to you. But this isn't the first time that I've not included the multiverse in something. So, yeah. Pretty much up to you guys how you would want those specific events to turn out. I feel like I rambled kind of through this, unnecessarily, but more or less for those who would really be calling out the whole fact that I didn't mention Thor or anything like that, I figured I would try in my best way to come up with an explanation. I could have definitely rambled less, but I think you guys more or less get the idea that it's either completely up to you guys or it would just go exactly the same, except Hulk wouldn't be a factor. So, with that said, leave all thoughts or opinions or anything like that, or overall suggestions or anything like that in the comments about what you think really about the whole idea of Whiplash surviving and hashtag turning good, and how you think the story could have gone with Thor up in space and just overall without a multiverse, and what you guys think of Whiplash surviving and turning good and just part of the MCU, and what you guys think of him as a whole, because like I said, I definitely think that he is one of the most underrated Marvel characters, and I definitely went a much different direction with this than I thought I was going to. So with all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this story, and stay tuned for Eric Matthews. See you later.